It's been a rough last 48, 72 hours for us following the Mariners, rooting for the Mariners. There's nothing worse than having a black eye. I'm going to tell you a brief story about a time that I received a black eye. Yes, it actually comes from my high school playing days of baseball. We had a coach who would tell us that you should spin around in the outfield. You'd throw the ball straight up in the air, and you'd have to try it and catch it. I lost the ball in the sun. The ball did not lose me, hit me directly in the eye, and for 2 weeks, I had a giant black eye. Nothing worse than walking around with that. And that's what we're going to have to do as people who follow the Seattle Mariners. But, the black eye goes away eventually. And I don't want people to, because of the last 48 hours, all of a sudden say to themselves about the direction of this baseball team that this is now hitting a point where it's all downhill from here. I don't want people feeling that way. And I'll explain why I feel that way in a moment. And it might be difficult for you to get to that point. I think for some, John Stanton, who at the very least did speak to the media yesterday, and I think he does deserve credit because I was of the belief that they were just going to send Scott Service out there by himself in the press conference. John Stanton addressed the comments made by Kevin Mather, some of which were just racially insensitive. Others were just stupid and put baseball's ownership in a really bad spot for the next collective bargaining agreement. Stanton said that Mather's comments don't reflect what we believe were inappropriate.
There were a number of comments made by Kevin that, as I've said, didn't reflect the Mariners, don't reflect what I believe, what our ownership believes, and were inappropriate. And those comments included some of the things that have been referenced with respect to our players, and in particular, the importance of diversity and inclusion in our organization. And we have that as a central value to the organization, and we will do everything we can to continue to deliver on that commitment.
The comments don't reflect what we believe. Not a strong indictment of Kevin Mather, who resigned, wasn't fired. And I understand that there are some people out there that heard that and think to themselves, wait, really? That's all the blowback that's coming from ownership, from the executives? And I think it's fair to question that. And maybe because of that, you are wondering about the direction of the team. And not just because of the racially insensitive things that he said, or because the ownership might be in a difficult spot in 2022, the year that the Mariners are supposed to be ready to go, where now there might not actually be a baseball season. But there's also the element of how are players going to deal with this, seeing as I described earlier, Kevin Mather just basically pulled a Michael Scott in the office and read a list of, boom, roasted. Kyle Seager, overpaid, boom, roasted. Evan White, we took advantage of him, boom, roasted. James Paxton, him too, boom, roasted. Jared Kelenic, man, that guy wants a lot of money. Sounds greedy, boom, roasted. Everett Aquasox, you got a crap field, boom, roasted. I mean, he went all out. And I know some people are going to bring up the idea of cancel culture. I'm rolling my eyes so hard at you, and I hope that you hear how hard those eyes be rolling. But I can understand why there are a lot of people that maybe hear Stanton not really distance himself and think, oh, man, I mean, where is this going? And with good reason. I mean, it's 20 years since they've made the playoffs, and the history of this organization has not been a pretty one. It really hasn't. But I think we need to draw a line of demarcation between Mariners upper management and the actual baseball operation. A firm, strong line. And you know what? I'm really glad that we got to hear from both Jerry Dipoto and Scott Service this morning, because Jerry Dipoto, when asked about what the organization has been through over the last 48 hours, I think had the response that John Stanton probably should have taken.
How we deal with the fan reaction is that I'm embarrassed, and I'm certain I speak for all or most everybody in the Mariners family. I'm embarrassed that this is the way we're viewed, because for those of you who've been around me or Scott or this team, it's just, this is not how we're wired. And it's embarrassing to be categorized or deal with the stigma that we are now pinned with, and we have to shed it. That's it's ours to bear, and we now have to be accountable to that.
Jerry's mad about it, rightfully so. Scott Service is mad about it, rightfully so. The players are mad about it, rightfully so. And they might have real reasons to question just the executives that are in play here with the Mariners. And I don't blame them. And I think that we should look at them differently than we look at management. Kevin Mather, and now him out of the picture. And maybe you think because Kevin Mather said this, what else was he getting away with? I know we had a couple of callers who suggested that. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, but maybe you are entertaining the idea that this is something that is a thought process that is held among other people that are in the Mariners brass. And I'm not even really going to go down that road, but I understand why you might feel that way. And when you don't have John Stanton strongly distancing himself from it, saying it just doesn't reflect us, I can understand why you maybe feel that way about the direction of the organization going forward. But that's the baseball executive side of things. That's the side of things that doesn't even touch the actual thing that you watch every single day on the diamond. And the main reason I want that line of demarcation between the front office and the baseball operations is because I actually think the baseball operations are heading down the right path. I do. What was it, 2018, where this team was a bunch of pretenders, and no offense, but they were. You know, teams like the Astros, the Yankees, the Red Sox, trash can banging or not in Houston, I mean, they didn't look at you as an actual threat or a challenge. And, you know, the last couple of years would suggest that they weren't that much of a challenge, obviously, especially the last two. But this team went from having the worst farm system in baseball to having the second best. And, I mean, there's a list now. A list of prospects that are going to be here soon. Jared Kelenic, Logan Gilbert. I don't know if Kevin Mather's speaking out of turn saying that they're going to be here in April. I doubt they'll be here in April because I don't think that would make a whole lot of sense for them to be here in April because it doesn't, even if they're talking about service time manipulation, I don't think you can manipulate service time and have a guy ready to go in April. Usually it's like May, June, the earliest you're going to be able to bring a guy up. But you got those two. You have Julio Rodriguez, you got Emerson Hancock, Noel V. Marte, Taylor Trammell, George Kirby. And on top of that, you have a really good core, I think, in place right now. Kyle Lewis wins the American League Rookie of the Year. I thought Justice Sheffield closed out the season on a really impressive stretch, and Marco Gonzalez was about as consistent as it gets last year. There's a solid core in place. And I know, this sounds like a sell job, I sound like a shill, blah, blah, blah. Pow, you're just saying this because you're on the flagship station for the Mariners. I'm coming in as a neutral observer, and I've had a totally different experience with the Mariners than you guys.
Who was that impression of?
I don't know, Maura Dooley behind the glass. This is basically me impersonating a listener that I don't actually think listens to this program anymore. This is like me thinking about like random Texans that like didn't like me back in the day.
That's what it sounded like.
What voice should I come up with?
You're here now. You're in Seattle now.
Is
better?
Are there people that are out in that are outside of the city that perhaps would speak like this, or is that just an entirely am I just totally butchering the region here?
I was going to ask DJ, but he's busy. He's from here, so he would know better.
Okay, maybe I need to have a Canadian accent or something like that.
He was imitating people that were mad at him for kind of like stumping for the flagship team, and he did a southern accent. He was asking if there's anybody in the region.
Cedar Woolley up in Skagit County, definitely. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
I'll take a shot at them.
Okay, okay, fine. And maybe I'll do it. Maybe I'll do a Canadian accent as the people who are going against me, because as you all know, that I represent the Quebecois, and on top of that, you know, Canada, America's hat. No offense to those people who are listening in Vancouver. What? I'm sorry about that. Wait a second. Where was I going? Sports, baseball, the Mariners. The direction of the franchise. Guys, have faith. And I know that's easier said than done because this is a baseball team that, again, for 20 years has been frustrating you so. All I'm saying is I think they're taking the right steps. In my year and a half here, I know it doesn't outweigh your 20 years of following this team and all the stuff that you've seen along the way. But I have been here, I have been in a place where things were at absolute rock bottom. I was in Houston when they changed leagues. I was in Houston when they eventually, yes, perhaps with some aid from trash cans, slowly rose their way up the ranks. It takes time, but when it happens, it's pretty fun. And I feel like the Mariners are walking down that path. So don't let these comments make you think that all of a sudden the path has just led off a cliff and we're free falling right now, waiting to splat on the rocks. That is not the case right now. That was really graphic.